UFC 267, Draftkings has released the salary, so we can take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. We did really well last week, and if you tuned into the show and used what we talked about, you had a good Saturday as well. We hope to carry that into this card that is absolutely stacked. We're going to take a look at the salaries from top down and talk about our favorite plays throughout the slate. First, we're going to look at Islam Makhachev. He's 9,600. He's fighting Dan Hooker, who's 6,600, and I understand why he's priced this high. I understand why he's a huge favorite. I understand why a ton of money's coming in on him. He might be the best fighter in the division. The reason why I have trouble playing him in DraftKings this week is because of that price point. $9,600 against Dan Hooker, who is extremely difficult to finish, and only 3 rounds to work with. This isn't like a main event spot where he has 25 minutes. He only's got 3 rounds. Is he going to dominate Dan Hooker for all 15 minutes of the fight? Probably not. Dan Hooker's going to have success in spots. Let's say Islam wins 10 of these 15 minutes. If he does that and he goes to decision, how many points does he score for you on DraftKings? 70, 80, 90 if we're lucky? Maybe he pulls off a mask and is Randa Marcos and scores 125 or whatever it was. Either way, you're probably not getting 100 points. You're probably not getting 9,600 points. He's not going to pay off his salary for you at this price tag against somebody like Dan Hooker. And on the other side of this fight, you've got Dan Hooker at $6,600, which seems like a steal. Dan Hooker is always live for a finish, and he's got great anti-wrestling technique, really good uppercuts, and he's got a nasty knee up the middle from a standing position. He's got finishes with this knee, and it's not just getting the tie clinch and throwing something up there. He's literally timing them on their way in, getting joint to target like that. If Makhachev starts shooting from a further distance, he might become desperate. Well, then he's going to be able to time one of those knees up the middle, and he'd be live for a finish here. I don't think it's going to happen, but if that's the script that we'd be able to write, and that doesn't sound so far-fetched. It's Dan Hooker. He's a badass. So I like Dan Hooker in this spot at 6,600. I don't think I'll get there in many of my lineups if I don't have to. 9,600 on Islam Makhachev, it's a big no for me. I think that's a pass for me this week. Now at 9,500, only 100 less, you would think, oh, that's too much, right? It's not. It's not. KHAMZAT CHIMAEV is 9,500. He's fighting Li Jingliang at 6,700. CHIMAEV looks like a smash in this spot. That's what he does. He smash everybody. Brother, I smash you. I smash you, brother. Wolf gonna eat you. That's KHAMZAT CHIMAEV, just in a nutshell. The reason why I'm so confident in that is not only because of what we've seen from CHIMAEV, but also when you look at Li Jingliang, quietly almost 34 years old, he was taken down 4 times by Neil Magny. I see a lot of similarities, a lot of technical grappling, great gas tank, long frame. I just think that KHAMZAT CHIMAEV does all the things that Neil Magny does a little bit better than Neil Magny. We're going to see a dominant performance here from Boris, and we'll probably see him in the octagon in 3 weeks. I'm excited for the return of KHAMZAT CHIMAEV. I'm going to lock him in to a lot of my lineups if I can. I've been tinkering with it a little bit before filming, and it's hard to pay $9,500, but you can make it work. You can definitely make it work. Next we have Taguir Ulenbekov, who's 9,400. He's one of these questionable plays at the premium range. He's fighting UFC newcomer Alan Nascimento. Nascimento's only 6,800 on this card. Here's what scares me. We've seen him fight in the UFC once. He fought Bruno Silva to a decision. He was largely outstruck by Bruno Silva on the feet. Bruno Silva's 5'4". At flyweight, that doesn't sound crazy. He's 5'4". Okay, that makes sense. But Alan Nascimento is going to be coming in here at 5'9", and he's coming out of Shooter Box, Diego Lima, just like Charles Oliveira and other UFC fighters and UFC caliber talent, and I'm really interested to see how he matches up because he's nasty on the ground, and Taguir may be having to shoot for takedowns. He's proven to be really hittable, and against the taller man, who knows how he's going to react on the feet. So if he starts shooting for takedowns, I could see a path to victory where Nascimento catches him with something where he's coming in, whether that's a triangle or a guillotine or maybe even an anaconda choke. I think that's a real clear path of victory to Alan Nascimento making his UFC debut. It's not that I don't like Taguir at 9,400. I don't like him because I don't think he's going to win. Alan Nascimento, probably the best value on the slate, one of my favorite plays on the slate at 6,900. At 9,300, you have Lerone Murphy. He's fighting Makwan Amirkhani, who's going to come in at 6,900, and this is another questionable spot. We saw Lerone Murphy look real good in his 3 UFC fights, but in one of them, he did go the distance with Zubaira Taguir, who we're going to talk about later, and Taguir was able to take him down 6 out of 8 times. Makwan Amirkhani shoots, and shoots. Look at Lerone Murphy's takedown defense. It's roughly 40 to 41%. Amirkhani's takedown accuracy, it's around 40%. You would think that they kind of cancel each other out, but what stands out to me the most is that Amirkhani's landing 3.6 takedowns per 15 minutes. So if he's landing at a 40% clip, that means he's going to shoot and he's going to keep shooting, and I think he's going to have the wrestling advantage here. Those who are going to bet Lerone Murphy might think he can go out there and knock Makwan out, but I don't think that's going to happen either. We saw Amirkhani get knocked out by Shane Burgos, but we also saw him stand across from Edson Barbosa and Kamela Kirk, and he lost, but he didn't get knocked out. I don't really like Lerone Murphy in this spot. I don't really like Makwan Amirkhani that much in this spot either, because I could see this being a low-scoring decision on both sides. There are way more attractive fights in this card with higher finishing upside. I'm probably not going to get there in many of my lineups, but if I do, Makwan Amirkhani is probably the play. Next we have, just like Jai Herbert last week, the best play of the slate. We have the UFC newcomer, Albert Reyev. He's fighting Roman Kopylov, and I think we see Reyev go out there, implement a wrestling-heavy game plan, get Kopylov to the ground, and submit him down there. We saw him submitted by Carl Roberson in his last fight in the UFC, and I think we're going to see him get exposed on the ground more by Albert Reyev. Another reason why I'm confident in Reyev is because a ton of money has been coming in on him. And when you see these big favorites with money continuously coming in on him, that means somebody knows something. And I think that the line is swelling because people are starting to recognize this clear path to victory. And I think Albert Reyev is going to come in at relatively low ownership because of the name recognition that we have on the card. You've got KHAMZAT CHIMAEV, Islam Makhachev. If you play either of them, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to get to Albert Reyev and target at least one of the 5-round fights that you have on this card. And I'm going to try to get him in as many lineups as possible, but I think he's the best play of the week. I think he scores over 100 points. Next we have Magomed Ankalaev. He's fighting Volkan Oezdemir, who's 7,100. I love Magomed Ankalaev in this spot. I think he's really live for a finish, and I think he's going to be able to piece Volkan up on the feet. What impresses me most about Ankalaev is that he doesn't seem to throw with a ton of power, but his technique is so crisp, so fast, and his placement is perfect most of the time on these punches that they're landing heavily. Volkan Oezdemir, he's very, very hittable in there. We saw him get KO'd by Yuri Prohaska, which, no shame in that, but he's also had the weirdest career, right? He was knocking people out left and right. Then he gets smushed by Daniel Cormier, loses a fight that he wins to Dominic Reyes, and then he wins a fight that he loses to Alexander Rakic. Just very weird. A lot of question marks with Volkan Oezdemir. Definitely a fade for me this week. I love Magomed Ankalaev, not only in this spot, but just as a fighter in general. I think he can give guys at the top of the heap a lot of problems, and we'll see that in the years to come. Magomed Ankalaev is the pick. I'm going to try to get him in a lot of my lineups because I think that he's live for a finish here, and even if he doesn't get the finish and wins by decision, I think, again, that striking technique is going to result in at least a knockdown or 2 in this spot. So even in a decision, I think that he'll be able to pay off that price tag, and he can also wrestle better than Volkan, so there's that. Last of the premium options, you have Jan Blachowicz at 9,000. This is a 5-round fight. It's for the strap. This is the main event, so you want a little sweat on this at the end of the night, and I think that Jan Blachowicz is a smash spot. Credit where credit is due. He's fighting Glover Teixeira, who has been a badass, who's been a man of steel, has been doing it forever, it seems. Big respect. The reason why I don't want to get to Teixeira here is because, yes, he's been on a tear, but he's winning these fights with his chin, his cardio, and his grappling advantage. He beat the teeth off of Anthony Smith. He was getting pieced up on the feet. Back in 2017 when he fought Alexander Gustafsson, and Gustafsson was fighting him like he was playing UFC on the Xbox. He did 3 straight non-contested uppercuts with the same hand. It blew my mind while I was watching it. When you couple that with what you see against Anthony Smith, what you saw briefly against Thiago Santos in spots, I just don't think that he'll be able to strike with Yan, legendary Polish power. Yan outstruck Israel Adesanya, Dominic Reyes, Luke Rockhold, KO'd Corey Anderson sleep. We also know that he can fight for 25 hard minutes, even if he's mixing in some grappling there. So I like Jan Blachowicz in this spot. I think that if he starts sitting down on some of these punches, that he gets Glover out of there early. He might be the highest owned fighter on the slate outside of maybe Pyotr Yan, which makes sense because he has 5 rounds to work with, but I think Jan Blachowicz is a great play this week at 9,000. Now we're getting into that high 8K range, starting with Alexander Volkov. He's fighting Marcin Tybura, who's coming back at 7,300. Volkov, just like in all of his fights, he's going to have the height and reach advantage here, but he's also the much better striker. Tybura has had success with his grappling in his last few fights, and he seems to have the grappling advantage in this spot, but Volkov is so difficult to take down. Not if you're Curtis Blades. Tybura is not Curtis Blades, so we're okay there. But Volkov looks like he's probably going to end up being too much for him. I think that he's going to land heavily, and also a little bit of pressure being taken off of Volkov not having to fight 25 minutes. He can really sit down on his punches, and I think that once he starts putting combinations together, Marcin Tybura is not going to have an answer, and he's going to break him. I like Volkov to finish this fight inside the distance. I really am not going to be getting to Marcin Tybura this week. Next we got Pyotr Yan. He's 8,800. He's going against Corey Sandhagen at 7,400. Pyotr Yan has to be the most terrifying man that weighs 135 pounds, maybe of all time. There has been a good amount of money coming in on Corey Sandhagen, and for good reason. If you can get plus money on the Sandman, you better take that. Price at 7,400, but fighters of his caliber typically aren't priced down there at 7,400, so I can see the appeal. However, Pyotr Yan is a destroyer. He just walks through people. He doesn't seem to care much for the offense that's coming back at him, and he has pace, power, and he was throwing Aljamain Sterling all over the octagon in their fight. MMA math doesn't always line up, but Aljamain sliced through Corey Sandhagen like a warm knife through butter. So I really like Pyotr Yan in this spot. I think that he might be the highest owned player at 8,800. It would make sense with 5 rounds to work. He might score 135 points. We know that Sandhagen's tough. Love Pyotr Yan in this spot. I won't be getting to any Corey Sandhagen in any of my lineups. And I know when I say lineup, I don't play 150 lineups. I like playing maybe 10. Right, and these are in different single entry 3 max tournaments. I'd rather put more on the line to make more than to jump in a lottery with 150 lineup, split the winnings 1,000 ways. Next we have Demir Izmagulov. He's fighting Magomed Mustafayev. Izmagulov is coming back at 8,700. Mustafayev is coming back at 7,500. And I think that Mustafayev is really, really good value here at 7,500 in this matchup. Demir Izmagulov has looked good in the UFC, but he's been largely a decision fighter, and I don't think that he's going to be able to handle the power and the pressure of somebody like Magomed Mustafayev. The guy can crack, the guy can grapple, and I think that he's just a lot to deal with. Now, Izmagulov deserves his respect. He's very, very good, but if he does win, he probably isn't going to score that many points. We've seen that in his last couple of bouts. But this, to me, looks like a good spot to find some value at 7,500 with good finishing upside. I like Magomed Mustafayev in this week, and I'll probably try to get him in some of my lineups, but definitely not looking to play Demir Izmagulov against somebody who's difficult to put away like Mustafayev. 8,600, you have Andre Petrovsky. Lock him in. Do it now. Pause the video. Go to your Draftkings. Lock him in. Do it now. He's going to finish Yao Zhong Hu. Yao Zhong Hu is coming back at 7,600, and that seems like crazy pricing. Even if he was 6,900, I wouldn't play him. I wouldn't play him at 6,900. There's also a ton of money that's coming in on Andre Petrovsky, and for good reason. Yao Zhong Hu is completely outgunned in this matchup. He hasn't looked particularly good in the UFC, has very limited experience, and I think Petrovsky is going to smash him in this spot. Andre Petrovsky is probably going to score over 100 points. This is what I was talking about earlier with Islam Makhachev. He's at 9,600. Drop down 1,000, and you have Andre Petrovsky. Now, would you rather your fighter, who's a big favorite with a lot of money coming in on them, fight Dan Hooker or 3-2 Yao Zhong Hu? That's how you have to start thinking about this, right? You don't need to play the best fighters, you need to play the fighters that other people aren't playing. Next, we've got Capoeira Zaleski. That's what we'll call him for the video. He's fighting the UFC newcomer out of France, Benoit Saint-Denis. Capoeira Zaleski always puts together a fun fight for the fans, unless he's fighting Muslim Salikov. But outside of that, he likes to bring the fight, he brings the pressure, and he's probably going to have the striking advantage over the UFC newcomer. However, when we look at what the God of War has been able to do outside of the UFC, he is a grappling heavy game plan and he's a finisher. The UFC matchmaking may have given Benoit somebody who's just relevant enough, but somebody who's just beatable enough, especially with his path to victory being as clear as it is. I like Benoit Saint-Denis at 7,700. I think that's excellent value. Next we have Shamil Ghazmatav. He's fighting Lord Michal Oleksiejczuk. I really like Ghazmatav in this spot. Now, I don't dislike Oleksiejczuk at 7,800, but when you take a look at the undefeated Russian grappler, it's always hard to go against. We've seen Oleksiejczuk get exposed by OSP and by Jimmy Crute in the grappling department. We might see more of the same here with Shamil Ghazmatav. Shamil may be able to get Oleksiejczuk on the ground, secure a dominant position, and probably tie up a rear naked choke if I had to guess. If not, he's going to be able to secure takedowns, control time, and in decision, actually score a decent amount of points. It's the mid-range guys, this is where the money is made. I think that if he gets a finish here, he's going to be one of the better plays on the slate. So I'm going to go with Shamil here at 8,400 as my preference in this fight, and decent value. At 8,300, we're looking at Zubair Tukhugov. He's fighting Ricardo Ramos. Now, Zubair hasn't looked particularly good in the UFC. His best win is Kevin Aguilar. Kevin Aguilar is 1-4 in the UFC and probably not with the promotion anymore. Ramos looks like much of better value here at 7,900. I could see this being a relatively low-scoring decision, and it's really hard to say with these fighters who's going to win, but again, I'm not really looking to get here in a lot of my lineups. I might change my mind throughout the week when we look at our final thoughts, but for this first look, I'm going to be staying away from this fight entirely. And I could say the same thing about the last fight that we need to cover with Amanda Hebos versus Verna Janjidova. Hebos was sent to the Shadow Realm by Marina Rodriguez in her last time out, but I think she gets back on track here. I think she's going to have the striking advantage over Janjidova, but I don't see myself getting to this fight. I'm not really firm on either side of this. I don't think Hebos is absolutely going to win. I don't think I'm going to be playing this on DraftKings in any of my lineups. This is a fight that I'm going to be avoiding just because of the low finishing upside, likelihood of them going to decision and not scoring that many points. Now you'd just be looking at fighters below 8,000. Again, Ricardo Ramos, difficult to say if he's going to win or not, but also difficult to see him scoring a ton of points if he does win. Lord Michael is probably not going to get the win over Shamil, but if he does knock him out, and he's got a decent amount of points. So if you tried to get different, I wouldn't be mad at you. I don't think Lord Michal is a terrible play. God of War Benoit, 7,700, looks like a great spot for him. Yao Zong Hu? Magomed Mustafayev looks like good value at 7,500. Corey Sandhagen, it's hard for me to get there. Marcin Tybura, it's hard for me to get there. Glover Teixeira, Volkan Oezdemir, Roman Kopylov, all these guys are really difficult for me to get to. It's difficult for me to see these guys winning. Below that, however, Makwan Amirkhani, Alan Nascimento, and Dan Hooker all look like really good plays at the low end of the slate. Again, do your best to try to stay in the middle because that's what's going to make you different, and you don't need the best lineup, you need the most different lineup. My three favorite plays on the slate total are Andre Petrovsky, Jan Blachowicz, Albert Reyev. I know those aren't the cheapest, but I would recommend trying to get 1 to 2 of them in all of your lineups. I love them this week. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe so I can bring more of this to you.